Reminder of the full budget. And with this year, with some of the work we were doing earlier, starting, I think we started in December, fall, and right up until now, where we've been talking about components of the budget and understanding all of the different pieces, I figured this would be a great way to piece it together, and you should start to see some of the things that we talked about in those trainings now come to life here in a full budget inside of the old school binder, right? A lot of people think I'm a tech person, but the truth is I like this way better than I actually like looking at it on the screen. I've never been able to move away from that, but this will be a nice way for us to go through this tonight. Pretty open format. This is not any formal process. It's a matter of, I'm going to take you through each section. First, I'm just going to give you the breakdown of how it's been put together. And then we'll start to go piece by piece. And it's ask questions, clarification as we go. There's no waiting for me to be done. It's nothing like that. It's pretty wide open workshop model. And we go from there. This is the first draft of the budget. The board will be required to vote on a final budget on April 16th. Monday night is the 24th, where you'll see the first real presentation of the budget to the public in a draft form in a public setting. And then from there, from here to there, we can make changes if so needed, based on what we discuss. What I can say is this year's budget is not it's nothing real great about this budget. It's a pretty routine, straightforward, you'll see that as we go through it. Different years and different budgets have different things based on the pressures and where they come from when it comes to the state, the taxes, tax, and all those different things. This one is about as run-of-the-mill as you get, and we'll talk about that. So we'll go right through, I guess, first, just format. The way you'll see the summary sheet in the beginning, the different tabs. Now, the last tab 8 doesn't have anything in it. That's a place for you to add things. So as questions arise and maybe you need more clarification or more information about things, you can add to this. What I like about the binder is that this becomes yours. You get to have it all year. It's a great way to bring it to the meeting every time. And if you want to refer to it and look at it as you get the final budget in here, whatever that ends up being, you can then add to the binder however way you wish. And we'll put things in there too as we go throughout the year, just so you're informed and have different educational pieces that are good for you to know. So that's what makes this process pretty good. The way the breakdown is, you can see the 8 sections. The first part is obviously going to give you a rundown of where the budget is, the overall setting up, the overall budget. You have your revenues and expenses. And then you get into the more refined details of the budget, where you get into the object lines, you start to get into the function lines, and you start to look at it line by line. So you're looking at the full budget here. All right, you're getting every line that's in it. You're seeing different expenses over time. You can look at a historical perspective. I will show you that. What's very important to remember, and you'll probably hear me repeat this tonight because as you're looking at the numbers, there is a difference between what's called an expense number and what is called a budget number. All right? So you'll see prior years have a label of an expense number. That means that's what actually got spent in that line in that year. All right? Whereas a budget number is what was budgeted last year versus this year. So there is a difference. Okay? So you'll watch lines and go, why does this line look like this? Well, we expensed that this much this year, but we budgeted this much, right? And you'll see some discrepancies that will show up that way, and typically that's what it is. And I usually can, explain how that happens. But pay attention. We'll go through that, but just know there is a difference. It's It's very important to know that. You will get into, obviously, the property taxes, the tax cap, the formula. You'll look at the history of taxes over time. We will look at enrollment and staffing. You will see our enrollment numbers across the school district. You'll also see it in relationship to the elementary school and staffing. This is what we have in here now. And then we'll look at our reserves. And that is the binder. Any questions on anything?
Oh, thank you. This is very fun.
All right, good. So here's what we'll do. We'll start, if you go right to section 1, you will see the overall summary of the budget. So this you see every year in a presentation, and revenues meet expenses. That's how you balance a budget to a place where you have no surplus or gap. At least start off the budget. In this particular case, this is a year overall we have a pretty good increase in state aid. Turns out this year our foundation aid actually came back quite well. Can't say that's promising for the future, but it is what it is for this year. And if you look at, and we'll look at that revenue in a minute. I'm just giving you some overall things we're going to go into. This budget is built, if you see in the yellow, the third yellow line down, that the increase in the tax levy, this budget is right now proposed at a 199 tax increase. Typically, we try to stay below 2%. That has always been our historical perspective. Doesn't mean we have to. You can go as high as 4.0% or 4.07% according to the tax cap, and we'll get into that later, but there is that always a possibility, or you can go lower. That is always an option of the board to change that. But at this point, the budget is built at 199. There's no use of reserves in this budget. Just one, which is the, it's just a little bit of money. It's the workers' compensation, and that's just to pay some tail claims that are left over from the previous year. And that's typically what we do with tail claims and workers' compensation. And it's about $40,000. Nothing that's a major deal in terms of use of reserves. This budget does eliminate 8 positions through attrition. We had up to 15 that we could have chosen from. We came down to eliminating 8 and 7 being replacing, meaning we're going to intend to hire up to 15. And this budget also maintains all programs as they currently are. So that's the overall summary. So, looking at the first page.
Quick question. We haven't voted on it yet. The Maritime Health. Is that included in here? Or?
It's not actually, and I think if the board, let's say the decision is to go with it, if we have an option this year, it would be on this year's budget. So I think we're going to have a conversation there about the general fund, the reserves. That's going to be a different conversation, but if it flows into next year, it's not necessarily built in here. Thanks. Okay. Let's see. So, first section of this first page you'll see is our expenditures. These are overall summaries of expenditures, broken down into instructional salaries, non-instructional salaries, equipment, contractual material supplies, bonuses, debt service benefits, and then any internal transfers for capital. There is our largest increase is actually is the BOCEs and the benefits line. Benefits is going up about 8%. Typically, right now, health insurance sits around 5, 6, 7, 8% increases. That's where we're living in terms of insurance. In terms of our history right now and its claims history, that's the increase that we anticipate or estimate will happen next year. That's why we're actually looking at these options like Marathon Health, and maybe we can start to find other options of way to save money in health insurance. That's probably the largest driver right now in terms of increases in the budget. The other one is our BOCEs budget is going up 14% at $1.2 million. You'll see that line in the top part of the expenditures. And that is mostly special ed placements and CTE enrollment, for its full enrollment now going in for this year, according to Arwada, as we have phased that in over the last couple of years. So we are now fully expended in terms of that part of the budget. So those are the two biggest increases. Salaries are going up about 4%, $688,000. Non-instructional, 3.8. Equipment shows a 14% increase, but that's a $70,000 increase. That money is directly associated to their operations side of the budget, buildings and grounds and maintenance, as they will need equipment to function. So we are increasing the budget by 70 on the equipment side. Debt service is gone down significantly. You'll see that that's a 15% decrease at 751. What has happened is the middle school ban for 20 years, or bond for 20 years, has now fallen off. So what you will also see is the associated building aid that comes with that. So when you look at the revenue side, I'll show you how the building aid also is lower as the debt service is lower. So they end up pretty much a wash as far as the budget goes. So while it looks like, wow, we saved money there, well, we're really not getting the revenue that supports it that we used to get too, because the building aid is falling off with it. So that decrease is there.
But you'll see that shift tick back up next year from the current bracket that we're in, the 10.9.
Correct. So the 10.5 will finish this fall, get submitted, and then a state aid will start to roll in this next fiscal year when we complete that project, which is how you want to do it. You want to, debt service falls off, climb debt service back up, building aid comes back up too, and it evens back out, which is why you want to stay in finance. Any questions on the expenditure summary at the top? We'll get into detail as we go. The revenue side, you can see that the tax levy is going up $199 or $363,000. If you look down at the very bottom, it'll show you that a 1% change in the levy is about $179,000. Right? So any change in the levy will cost that much money in terms of costs. You want to go lower or increases in revenue. If you want to go higher, I don't know that we're going to find increases in revenue at this point, but that is a possibility for adjustment. Other revenue is up 3.3%, $202,000. I will point to that on the next section when we get into revenue and we'll look at the details of that. State aid is the biggest driver of revenue right now at 5% and going up $1.7 million. That is mostly foundation aid. That is a significant number. Appropriated fund balance will stay at 1.6. We will not put money into projects or additional projects this year. Reason being is the way that works is you're allowed up to $100,000 at this point under the law to do an additional capital project. The state legislature right now is putting it at $250 as a possibility. You can do very little with that much money in terms of construction. And the way it works is it comes out of your state aid for capital projects anyways. So you might as well just leave it in the $28.5 million project that we have coming up and leave it alone. It doesn't make much sense to put it separate because you can't do a lot with $100,000 anyway. You end up taking $100,000 and spending $35,000 to $40,000 on architect and engineering fees and construction fees than you do with even getting anything built. So we're not going to put that in there this time. We're going to leave it as part of the whole bigger project. So you'll see that change. And then appropriate reserve, I was telling you about the 30 to the 40, that's the tail claims for workers' compensation. And you'll see that in the reserve section. So overall, this is a $59,769,964 budget, a 3.2% increase, or $1.9 million increase. And there is no gap to fill at this point. Okay. So we go to section 3 now, which is revenues. So these are all of the money, all the revenues coming into the school district. It's broken down into 3 sections. The first top section, which you will see, is A 3100 through A 3289. This is all state aid. So you can look at the various lines and specific lines that we get from our state aid calculations. You can see the biggest number is the top number, that foundation aid. It's going up $1.7 million. That's an 8% increase in foundation aid. That's pretty large for a WEO. You don't typically get that size.
Where are we about?
Oh, sorry, section 3, we're in the next.
Section 2, right?
Oh, sorry, section 2. I went to 3, my fault. Did not navigate you well there, sorry. 2, section 2.
I'm a little.
Section 2, sorry. So, so foundation aid is going up significantly. The next line is our BOCES aid. That is our expense-driven aids. Expense-driven aids, the way they work is you expend money through BOCES, and the state reimburses you through aidable functions. It's not all that equal. A lot of times people think that, okay, we're 75 cents on the dollar BOCES aid. It doesn't always work that way based on whatever COSA or whatever expense it is. But the point here is, this is what, when you hear the concept of expense-driven aids, you're talking about BOCES and every aid that follows this all the way down. So foundation aid is the aid that's provided to us from the state based on our enrollment numbers, our free and reduced, or economically disadvantaged, and all these different calculations that gives us an aid number. The rest of the aid numbers down, BOCES and below, are expense-driven aids. You spend money, you get money back.
So if you look at historically over the last few years, that BOCES aid number has continued to increase. Obviously, because we do a lot of enrichment programs, summer camps, our student work-based learning opportunities for students. So that allows us to be able to get aid back on those things that we can offer.
BOCES is going up almost $500,000. And you will see the expense side of that if you go back to the first part. Remember, BOCES as a total expense is going up in the budget by almost $1.2 million. So on one hand, we're spending this much more, but we're getting this much more back in BOCES. It's not an even wash, but you get some revenue back. Okay. The next set of aids, you'll see excess cost aids and tuition aid chapter. Those are aids related to special ed and high needs situations. When you talk about high cost, the way it works is once you get above $30,000 or a certain limit of spending around special education, the state then reimburses you money, basically money above those limits. So then you're reimbursed that money back. And that is the money you get back from the state regarding that. That's related to special ed. The next one, A3101, transportation. Anytime we expend money in transportation, this is the transportation budget. This is about moving vehicles. When they're moving vehicles or anything associated with the moving vehicles, you spend that money, you get back transportation aid. Our transportation aid is estimated to go up by $300,000 this next year. So about a 10% increase there. Hardware, technology, textbook, library materials, and software are what are called categorical aid numbers. The state provides these numbers to us in a state aid report. These are dollar for dollar aid numbers. So you spend enough money, you get exactly that amount of money back. So we have right now, textbook money, say, is at $110,000. We spend $110,000 on textbooks, we get $110,000 back. Now, we will probably adjust this. We typically try to put more of the money in hardware, and here's why. The money then goes into equipment when you do it that way. You can always transfer money out of equipment. You cannot transfer money into equipment, according to the rules in the law. So what you do is you load up your equipment hardware side, and then let's say Tom and Stacey are like, hey, I need more textbooks, I need more stuff. I transfer money out of the hardware line and I put it more into textbook. Like we're doing that right now. You're gonna see a board transfer on Monday night. It's a significant one. That's about $50,000, which is gonna buy the textbook needs for the elementary school, but it's coming out of hardware. And that is dollar for dollar aids.
So that was,
Spend the dollar, get it.
that was a good change that the state made a few years ago, where they allowed some flexibility within those 8 areas. It used to be, you were in those buckets, and that was it. There was no ability to move it around between each other.
Any questions on that? Building aid, this is all related to capital projects. So when we do a capital project, we then have a ban or a bond that goes over 15 years, 20 years, based on whatever it's financed. And you pay what that's called our debt service. The state then gives us money back in building aid. In relationship to that, we're not always even, but this is our building aid number when it comes to our capital projects. And these are past capital projects that have been completed. So what you're seeing here is a decrease of $629,000. That's the building aid falling off from actually the original middle school. The middle school built in 05 or 4? 5, right? So that makes sense, 20 years, right? So the 20-year bond falls off. Here comes the debt payment. The aid comes off with it. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? So you'll see the two kind of line up. That is, and then incarcerated youth, those are aids, because we do have a county jail in our district. We have an incarcerated youth program. We're required to make sure that we have us teaching staff there to teach any kids specifically that are incarcerated. So we get reimbursed a little bit of money for that, but not a lot. But that's that aid for that. Next section is what is called our miscellaneous local resources. A1081 are payments in lieu of taxes. So we have talked extensively about this. Money. It was 3.879. Now it's going to be 3.77. The 106,000 is the final part of Best Buy coming off and onto the rolls. And Best Buy will fully be on the rolls when they weren't 3 years ago. So we did a slow effect with them. I think that's 40% of the bill is how it actually ended up coming about. So you'll see that decrease there in that pilot. But this is where that Central New York Oil and Gas number sits, right in that line. And that's 3.2 of it. And then there's various other pilots that make up the rest of the 600,000 or 500,000. The rest of these lines are miscellaneous lines that we have for the school district for different reasons. So we are adding in this year, you'll see interest earnings at $245,000. We are making some interest on some of our reserves being put into CDs. That is short-term CDs. So we are gaining some revenue there because interest rates are where they are. Got to be careful with that. Don't really know, we can say what we want to say about interest rates and where they're going to go. Personally, I think they're going to get cut, but I think that we can at least budget a revenue line that demonstrates some revenue in terms of the interest that we're getting out of that. That's what that line is.
Is that represented differently this year than it has been in the past?
We actually did not put that revenue in last year.
Do we have it? Not put it in?
Well, we ended up getting revenue this year from it. Yes. So now we're putting it directly here in the budget to say that's the estimate. It's a conservative estimate. Could be higher than lower. But I think it might be higher, but we'll see. Also, rental of real property, BOCES. We have $240,000 this year because the new lease that we're going to have with BOCES, that's going to be a 10-year lease on the maintenance facility. The original lease, we were going to turn the entire building over this next year and be at 360. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to be a couple of days. We're going to hold back because we're not quite ready with those 2 days at this point to give them the whole building. And then the following year, we'll be in the whole building in terms of rent in this new lease, if this board so approves, which will be $360,000 a year, and then it will climb its way all the way to $550 over the course of a couple of years. You will see that lease in your hands here, hopefully by Monday night, but our legal counsel just reviewed it. I gotta follow up with BOCES to make sure their legal counsel is good with it and see what they want to do in terms of approvals. But that rental revenue line right there, that is going to increase if we sign this lease over 10 years. It will eventually climb to almost over $500,000 for a 10-year period. That's a significant deal for us as a school district.
Didn't we use some of that, part of the calculation, when we process the fund balance cost with the anticipation of generating that?
We scheduled it to be used in a financing schedule for the capital project.
Oh, right.
As I talked to fiscal about that, we believe that that will not actually be necessary in the end. So once we know that for sure with fiscal, I will show you that schedule, but it was originally slated in the financing that 360 would be offsetting the debt service and building aid related to that project so that there's no impact on the tax, on the public in terms of tax levy, additional levy. So
you think the interest rate will be so low potentially that
that's exactly right. Because when they make those schedules, they're very conservative, like 7%. We're not gonna cut. We could, but we don't think so. So if we go down to like just 4, you're knocking that right out. And now that revenue is solely revenue for the school district to be used as needed and not related to the capital project, which I think is an important thing to remember as we move forward.
So the other piece, which I've talked previously to you about before, there's congressional funding that Senator Schumer gets. So we were on the docket for $1.5 million to go into that building. I just spoke with his representative today. They're not going to have any congressional spending this year. She expects there will be congressional spending next year. So we would see that money in 26, which makes sense anyways, because that's going to be about the time when we're ready to do some updates there.
That project doesn't start till next summer anyways. So
Fingers crossed. So the congressional funding.
As far as revenue, one of the big lines in here is the BOCES sub and enrichment reimbursement. This is where you see that large reimbursement that comes back for our enrichment expenses. So we might spend $1.4 million in enrichment, but we get back about $1 million. So these are our summer camps. These are all of our enrichment activities for kids. We do well with that. It's very much an appreciated thing by parents and families. But what I wanted to point out here is that it's not just expended by the school district, it's reimbursed. And you can see that $1 million is coming back this year. That's what we're putting revenue at for that.
And did we discuss possibly hiring someone who covers the summer programs, and that maybe that could be teased out of athletics? I know Ryan would be extremely disappointed by that.
Yes.
But is that something that would come out of there, or would it have to be a different?
It would be expended right through the enrichment budget that way, and then we would get reimbursed.
So the summer is the heaviest time because of the camps. But we do have programs going all year, so there's things happening all the time, and orders coming in, and submittals to BOCES for approvals. There's a lot of things that go on all the time. But we try to run as much through there as we can because we can get that aid back.
Another line I think is important to look at is A277007, other revenue farm rebates, pharmaceutical rebates. This is an important line for us because we are a self-insured model. We did make the change. We now work with Keenan, but it's in the, what's that BOCES?
Capital.
Capital Region, right? The Capital Region BOCES, we get rebates on pharmaceuticals where people can switch from name brand to generic. And when that happens, we get rebates on that. That's a significant revenue driver. And we do get that money every year. So because we're in this model, we're able to drive our costs down, obviously, for pharmaceuticals, but we also get rebates back.
Is that number based on anticipated changes, or is that?
It's based on use, it's on actual use, some claims, people actually using. So that's really it in that section of notable things. The final section is the property tax reserves and fund balance. The appropriated fund balance remains at 1.6. We did have it as high as 2 million. We're going to leave it at 1.6. That seems to be a healthy number right there. No change in special projects, or we're actually lower in special projects, and property taxes is a 199 increase at 363. Any questions on the revenue side section? All right, so go to the next section, section 3. This will fold out. Now what this is what's called the object side of the budget. So when we talked in our trainings, there are function codes, object codes, locations, and programs, okay? And the budget is divided in those categories in lines. There's different lines based on those codes, right? This is a summary based on object code, right? And it's a nice way to be able to look at the budget in a refined manner, but give you some decent detail. Now, the way this is set up is the first 4 columns here will give you from 2020 to 2024 what is called the final expenses. Remember in the beginning when I was saying that there's a difference between expenses and budget. And that will line up with the 5th and 6th column, which are the comparisons between last year's original budget and next year's proposed budget. Those are the 6 columns you're looking at. The reason why we give you this look is you can look at, okay, this is what we actually expended in these objects over a 4-year time. We can't tell you this year yet because it's the middle of the year, but we will have that, and that will be in the final audit in August when our auditors present that to you in the August audit report. And you can then say, okay, how did we do this year versus what we budgeted? And that's the way, that's why you set it up this way. You look at a historical perspective. And it's not always apples to apples. There's a lot of different reasons why it changes, and there's different flow of money going in from different lines. What you have to remember too is that just because a line went down or up doesn't mean that the budget went down or up. What could have happened is money kind of moved, right? So while this line went down, it went somewhere else. So the net effect of that made really no change to the budget. It's just the move of where it is. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it is an increase in budget. There are increases to the budget. There's no doubt about that. In salary benefits, BOCES costs and such. But don't always just assume that it's a cut. All right. It's these objects. Obviously, you can read the titles of those objects at the side. I'm not going to go line by line with this. This is a matter for you. You can study this however way you want in terms of, as a board, you can look at it when you leave here tonight, and if questions arise, you can ask those questions. That's one of the nice things about the binder is you get to take that with you, and you get to just start shooting me some emails and saying, hey, what happened here with gasoline? What happened with electric? Why is it doing? I'm just making it up, but but what happened, right? Like, is there something going on with costs? And I can try to answer that for you. So it's broken down and summarized for you in this particular look. Any questions about that?
Well, it's funny you said it. Just was a bit of transportation costs up 10%. Again, some fuel prices can go down. It's just a guess. But then fuel, is that additionally transportation and heating under 40?
433.
Yeah,
Um,
years 24, 25 budget.
that,
Same as 25.
that might not be, that might also include heating too, but I gotta double check on that.
I'm just curious, you know, a lot of things are the same.
No. It's, no, fuel is, I'm sorry, gasoline and diesel is down 511,
Okay,
and fuel is up top, so
So
there's
that's
fuel, they should really say natural gas.
okay. That's all right.
Alright, so,
Gotcha.
that might confuse me too, so,
What would be 10% up in transportation? We have more routes total, just the total 10%.
I would just ask, at some point, the central administration line's up 369,000, and then the other question would be, the BOC services, is that, so those.
yep, and so that line, central administration, is, just movement of people, so we got Ken and Heather and Daly all now in the central administration lines, and that's why that line goes up. You'll see associated shrinkage on different sides, you know, in terms of the line. So, it also has different costs associated with, materials and supplies, equipment, things like that. So, but that line is mainly that, those transitions of people to the central side. That's what that line is. Oh, the other line you asked me was those? That's the one I was talking about earlier, which is special ed and CTE increases. That number is the same number that you'll see on the front sheet for the $1.2 million increase.
So one of the things we're starting to see with special ed is placements that are opening, and students that have been in home instruction because there was no placement. Now we're getting into the placements. And that drives that cost up pretty significantly.
Do we have the GL program? Is that a employee full-time or do we, as needed from those?
Yeah, employee full-time. Yeah. We don't have the aid to necessarily support that. It supports about $40,000 of it, but that doesn't cover that.
I just asked if we moved into a shift, not that our BOCs, and it's tough to make it effective or efficient either way.
It is, it's a problem. It's a moving target. We don't, first of all, you don't know when a kid's gonna be in, and that's, when they show up, you have immediate, you're supposed to immediately evaluate, and they actually get audited by the state routinely. The corrections audit, they're always asking us about it, so that's object code, that section. The next section, or you'll see that this now is divided. The next one is what's by function code. Now you're going to start to see all of the lines in the budget, all right? So remember I was saying in the trainings about there's a function line, there's a function code, an object code, a location, and then a program. So the Board of Education right now has a budget of that first line, 1010 400 09 222. It's got 2660. There's no increase in that line. But you will see that that function code is the Board of Education. 1010 is all the Board of Education. That's that function. And you'll see that this report, all of it is divided and broken out by functions in the budget. This is all the lines. Now, what I will tell you in this current report, you will not see BOCES clearly defined by function yet. This is a export from Envision, because we're loading the budget into Envision for next year. We have not loaded the BOCES expenditures as it relate to this budget into Envision yet, right? The initial request for services is done. We do know the number in terms of the service costs that we anticipate next year, but they're not necessarily loaded in here by function. So if you see these huge discrepancies where it's like $1.2 million and it's zero the next year, it's a BOCES line. Just know that number's not loaded in there. But everything else is in terms of the function codes, and you can see each line. There is different instructional salaries and things like that. You'll see some increases on. There's a particular line you'll see, like the teacher center professional salaries is up quite a bit. That line is, you flip 1, 2, 3 in, and go down about a quarter of the page to 2070. There, 2070, teacher center professional salaries. That's up quite a bit. That's professional development. It's increased substantially in our school district, and it's averaging right now around $162,000 over the last 4 years. So we need to budget that number in order to pay for that.
And those, were you sending a message here with the general support workshop conferences for the board?
Where is it?
400% increase.
Yes. Yes.
Just kidding.
The whole $2,800.
We actually had some people go.
That's right.
So you can look through this. It could be as fun and as boring as you want to make it, right? Nothing else really in those lines of concern or whatever you find. You can ask questions. Please email them. Know. Moving on, section 5. Yes, sir.
As far as the considers, what 8 positions that were not filling, 7 positions to be refilled, does this count that have more people already signed up as far as?
Yes. This actually has where those positions should be. Yes. The next section, which is section 5, is the program side of the budget.
4.
5 or 4? 4, sorry. People get the right number, not the left number. 11 and 4. This one has blue at the top, yellow at the side. In November, December, we sent program budgets to our budget managers and our building leaders, and they build their program budgets. This is what they see. This is what they build. That yellow number is built by our program side of our budget, our building leaders and department heads. This is not staffing, this part of the budget. This is materials and lot supplies, equipment, contractual, generally those 3 areas. So you're not going to see staff inside of this section, all right? So if you wanted to know what the science department, because I know Linda likes to know what the science department is spending at OFA, right? Right, I would need to go to 2110. This is the 3rd page in 2110, A2110. And 2110 is the curriculum instruction function, right? And then I would go down and find, all right, I see career center, I see musical with contract, technology. No, that's the next page. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. Science equipment and service maintenance. They got a whole $850 coming their way this next year. But then you go 2 lines down, and they got $1,500 more. They apparently aren't looking for microscopes. Now they also, if you go down even further, you'll see that materials and supplies for science is $5,040. So the science department, between $850, $1,500, and $5,000, has roughly $7,000. Is that what it was when you were there? Yeah. About $7,000. So that's, depending on the department, the social studies department does not spend as much as the science department, right? Right. You know, and then the technology department spends far more than anybody else because they have to buy different equipment and supplies for their equipment, for their classes.
The other thing to note too is our teachers departments tend to run particular enrichment programs. And if there's equipment that goes with their enrichment program, that gets purchased through the enrichment COSER, and then we receive aid back on that. So many times they'll see something that they wanna, have a camp for, or a session, but also can use those same materials throughout the school year.
That is a very consumable in the science department as well, especially biology.
So let's say you wanted to know, boy, I'm really interested in our athletics lines. Ryan's not here, so we'll pick on him. You want to go, let's see, should probably number these, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in. You want to go to the bottom of the 6th page and find 2855 as a function code. In case you want to know how much we spent. Bottom of that page, you'll see athletics equipment. It's budgeted at 60. You can see the range that we spent there over the years. Athletics contractual. Referees and all of the things that we have to pay for athletics are expensive. You will see that line that is 2855 intergalactic contractual. Then there's the reconditioning of equipment. That's mostly football. Right? Football helmets reconditioned are expensive. Travel mileage, if they want to go to conferences. But you can start to see how the budget works, so you can look at it that way. Does that make sense? Are there any confusion on that in terms of what you're looking at and how to read it?
Is computers, 3 years cycle, is that what it is?
Tell me where you are.
2630. Is that the computer service?
2630.
Every 3 years, and this is the one of those years, it's a big bump like it was in 122, is that something that's different?
That's actually related to our categorical hardware. Remember when I said we want to take the categorical and throw it all in hardware? That's why we put that number in. Yeah, I just got to change it every summer.
Is there a reason why it's higher? Like if you went back another 3 years, would it be high 3 years back as well? Or is this just?
That's what we actually expense. So let's take that line. It's a good line actually to use. The line he's looking at is 2630. It's the middle of the page, Central Computer Services, Computer Hardware. So when you look at that line, in 2021, we actually bought $126,000, which is categorical $1-to-$1 dollar for dollar. If you spend it, the state gives us back. But the next year was only 65. Now, and then the next year went down to 10. We shifted the money more towards software or towards textbooks, away from hardware. And we bought the hardware or the technology either through BOCEs, most usually for them, because you can get it from an IPA, which is called an installment purchase agreement. We didn't buy it through that way. So it's all a matter of how we choose to use the categorical hardware. Sometimes we buy computers with them, iPads or whatever, and sometimes we buy textbooks. But it gives us that flexibility, and that's why you'll see that flex. Any questions on the breakdown of how this works? All right, moving on. We're now in section 5. This is the tax levy calculation. We are, under the law, allowed, if we wanted to, go up to 4.02% on the levy if we wanted to, which is the tax cap. We don't, but this is the calculation that gets us there. What's nice about this calculation that I put in here is I gave you 2 pages that will reference the different numbers inside of here. All right? So you take the prior year levy, which is last year, which was 18,256 to change, and then you multiply it by what's called your tax-based growth factor. You see that number is 1.0072. Now go all the way to the bottom of the page and see reasons for change. The associated dollar amount of that 1.0072 accounts for $131,444 of possible levy that it increase.
So that's some potential brick and mortar that's taking place.
In our district. We don't know what it is, but that's the number. Then you take our pilots receivable from last year, and you take out our capital levy exemption from last year, meaning this year, we're in a current year. Now, see that $503,000? Now go down to the bottom, or down just below the blue box, and you see the 2025-26 capital levy at 520. Now flip the page. Those two numbers are calculated from this calculation on that page. This is how you get the capital levy expenditure. What basically is going on in this calculation is you're taking what we are paying in terms of debt service, getting back an aid from the state, any exemptions to get to these exempt numbers that go into the levy amount. All right, so this is one calculation to get to that number, and this is where it comes into the formula itself. In the middle of that first page, you'll see the allowable growth factor, 2%. 2%, that's the actual cap that they talk about. CPI is above that, so we can only go to 2. If it was lower than that, say it was 1.5, then we can only go to 1.5. It would actually drive the levy down further. The allowable carryover is money that we could have used last year, that we did, or could have taxed last year on the levy. We didn't. We went to 199, but the levy was actually, could have been 1.2, 3.2. So the 45 can carry over. So we could gain it this year if we wanted to. And so that all calculates down to a possible levy of 4.02%. This budget is built at 1.9. Any questions on tax cuts?
So you can see the difference in that number. You could potentially, if you chose to go out to the 4.02, you're looking at about $734,000 in revenue from taxes.
From what you said, even though we go on 199 next year, that 2 creates
You can carry it over. That's what that carryover number is. It carries over to the next calculation. That's exactly right. There's a blue divider in this section that then brings you to the next page, which then gives you a history of our budget increases and tax levy increases over the last, I think it's
That's 2007.
2007, so 19 years. I'd like to use it on that long, but I think it's 19. So you can look at the historical perspective of increases over time. 10-year average at 1.25%. That's low for most school districts. All right, section 6, enrollment. This is a nice color-coded chart. This is 15 years of enrollment history divided by building. You can, when you look at this, you can track classes by the color that it follows diagonally down the chart. So when you look at, say, the kindergartners in 2020, 21, don't do pre-K, because pre-K and kindergarten don't line up. But there were 60 kids, and then you can follow them along. I don't know where 13 kids went. Not Lincoln, but they disappeared, right? So then they came back 4 years later.
We got 3 more.
You know, like how that works and how that happens, I can't explain. But you can watch the flow of a class go through the school over a 5-year period. That's that diagonal look. Does that make sense? So in the 25-26 school year, you can look at the enrollment numbers. Projected enrollment, it's low. Lowest since I've seen it that we've seen it in 15 years. Here's what I want to point out. If you look at, say you take the average 5 years, say from 2011 to 2015 in each building. All right? Appalachian averaged in 2011 to 2015 about 462 kids. It is now averaging, it's now at 368. That's a 20% decline over a 15-year period on average. They're now, it's a 350 kid building. That's a small elementary school. Wego Elementary, by the same accord, they averaged 527 from 2011 to 2015. They're down to 457. That's a 9% decrease. So there's a big difference between the two elementary schools in terms of enrollment decline. I can tell you that trend is definitely there. I pointed out to the board so you know that. It's important you know that between the two buildings, they are not apples to apples in terms of enrollment. Okay? You'll see the same thing between the middle school. It's about a 10% decline. And then you'll see the same thing with OFA. 673 on average the first from 2011 to 2015, now down to 594, 10% decline. So overall, enrollment is down. I mean, it's comparable. It's strange, right? So you go all the way back to 2022, we had 1889, then we climbed back up. Now we're back down to 1859.
So these are kids just in our building.
In our
So it
building.
doesn't include any outside placements.
It's not. Any questions on how this chart works? Okay. Next page is just a graph for you. You can see that the steady decline did happen in the early teens, and it's starting kind of level off, but the decline is there. That's the trend that you can see. Nothing new. Next page, class size projections for K-6. This gives you an idea of the total number of students in each grade level by building. And then you have the 6th grade, because 6th grade is elementary. They're certified elementary, they're elementary. Technically, they're elementary kids. I mean, I know they're in the middle school, but they're taught by elementary teachers. So, in terms of certification. So, here are section numbers for next year, as we have them broken out. And you can see that the average class size is about 18 to 20 overall. Any questions on how this chart works? All right, section 7 is reserves.
Sorry, we have questions on the
Yes.
6 weeks, so they've changed classes and stuff, so they really see all the kids in that. Is that true as far as, he says, is that taken into account as far as?
In terms of sections,
Yeah, well, no, as far as your.
this chart does not take account of that. It simply says 139 kids, 6 teachers, 23
Gotcha.
is the size. That's all it says. It doesn't say any more in terms of
I mean, I
where they move, how they move, or how they.
yeah,
It doesn't.
we didn't see all the kids in the
Based on the other districts around, what's the enrollment look like? Very similar with the decreases in percentages?
Depends.
So we're uptick, the main animals uptick a little bit, right?
Yeah, 750 home away. Crazy. How much you have?
But I would say
Crazy.
the rest of the region is,
What's made of North? So they decided a week ago. So, yeah, get into these numbers, it's the staffing side of this is what's important.
some of it's housing too. One of the challenges we talked about locally here in the community for quite a long time, it's just the lack of housing for folks, but.
You know, what's interesting is people aren't moving. So, like, looking at houses right now, like, typically houses on the market are like 1,200. It's like 200 on the market. It's down that much in terms of people. They're just not moving. So, I don't know if that plays into it. It's hard to say.
What makes me fearful is with our decline
It's definitely,
Solar farms and start building more houses.
I can't remember that, John.
Well, I think the other thing to keep in mind too, is that from the Rockefeller study, which I shared with the board, obviously those are recommendations. So there's nothing, nothing's known at this point from those recommendations of where we're gonna be when it comes to how foundation aid is calculated in the future, how that looks like. I definitely expect some changes, but we knew there wouldn't be any this year for several political reasons.
Our students that come in based on tuition, are they included in these numbers as well?
Yes. Is that going up?
Go back into that.
Good sign.
All right, section 7 is reserves. So these are all of our reserves. Our reserves are pretty healthy at this point. Workers' compensation reserve obviously pays those CAL claims and claims related to workers' comp. Then there's unemployment, which is a small reserve. The bigger ones are the retirement contribution reserve, which is for ERS employees only. This is a reserve that we can use. So the way this chart works is the first column is the projected reserve. This is what it's going to project it to be at the end of June. All right. So the board in June then gets transfers given to them to say, all right, this is what we want to do with any leftover fund balance. Put it in the reserves, how you see fit, and then you make a decision that way. So this is what they're projecting to be. So they're not going to go less than this. They only go up based on the year. But when you look at the next column, it says the max use of reserve for 25-26. This is the amount that you're allowed, the board is allowed to use towards this next year's budget. You could use the money. Does that make sense? So let's take the retirement contribution reserve. $700,000 is equal to the bill that we're likely to receive or we expect to receive from New York State for the employee retirement system. It costs about $700,000. So the board could say, all right, we're going to take $700,000, put it in, use that reserve, and pay that bill with reserves next year in the budget, and lower the tax limit. You can do that. We've done it. You have to. I'm just telling you, you can. That's what this chart will show.
So one of the pieces too, to just be cognizant, there's been a proposal out there or conversation around when the foundation aid formula gets adjusted in some way, that there's potential that there could be a board, depending on how your reserves are funded and what percentage that they're at, you could potentially be required to use some of your reserves in that budget. So it's not highly popular right now as far as that goes, but there is a proposal out there for that. So keep that in mind too. So if you're a district who's way on the other end of funding for your reserves, there's a good chance you may end up putting that into your budget sooner than later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the next one down is the retirement. This is the teacher's retirement system sub-reserve. That one's a little bit more money. But you could use $1.68 million, all of it if you wanted to apply to the budget. But that's for teachers' retirement. Next one down is what's called EBLAR, or the Employee Benefit and Accrued Liability Reserve. That pays for employees when they retire and they pay out their sick time, typically. Currently, as it's written in the contract, some people take sick time, some people take what's called the $30,000 incentive out of the contract. EBLAR cannot pay that $30,000 incentive in the current teacher's contract. So that comes directly out of the general fund. It's a big item that you need to be aware of.
Especially this year, it's a pretty significant.
So we have nearly seven retirees with that incentive. That's $210,000 out of the general fund for that incentive. If we were able to take it out of the LR, it would come out of the reserve and not the general fund. That's if it was sick time, applied to sick time. So, but that's what that reserve is used for. Capital reserves are capital projects, and then the health insurance reserve. That is, we can use as we see fit if we wanted to compensate, lower health insurance costs, or if there were high claims that came in, or we wanted to use it for marathon health or something like that. Reserve is available for that. So that's available as well. So all in all, these are the reserves as we got them broken out. That's what they are right now in January. They will be probably different in June. And that is the budget.
So keep in mind too that we don't have an approved budget yet from the state, so there could be some adjustments to the good or to the bad, depending on how things shake out. My guess is that we probably won't see much of a significant influx either way. I don't really foresee that at the moment.
So this is projected now, you can use it for that interest taxation.
Yes. Well, some of it. Not all of that gets thrown in the treasuries. Like, they go into short term, like 1 month, 6 months. Like, I can't plan very long. That's exactly where it goes from.
So in years past, sometimes we've seen, a little increase in foundation aid that may come in after the state budget's approved. With the temperature right now, I think, that's out there, I probably don't foresee that.
I don't see an increase in us, for us, foundation aid. We got quite a bit, but we'll see what happens with the legislation.
Can we please get an update from Cynthia with the long-range plan using the current numbers that was earlier? She had used, I think, 12% for health insurance and 5.7% for foundation. So those are the numbers.
Yes, we can do that. Any other questions? Helpful? This way?
Thank you.
Good. And like I said, just, hey, call, not bothering me. If you want to call and talk something through, please do. Or if you got questions, shoot me emails, report an email, and we'll try to answer.
You may have already said that, even the closest item,
It should be in the next week. Yeah, I'm going to talk to them about that. And we're looking to replace those sheets. Okay?
Thank you to all of you for, thank these guys, obviously too, I want to thank you guys for working on your program budgets and being a part of this process as well. Thanks for doing it.
Any motion to adjourn? I tried. I don't know. You need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yes.
Any motion? Second? Discussion?
Did you second your own?
No.